I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I don't know what time it is, probably afternoon, evening over there. So
Yeah, it's 6:33 p.m. in Dubai, and we have folks from India and different parts of our different communities joining in. So we have all kinds of time zones in here. People can just comment. But Zsolt, I have to tell you something. Are you
yeah.
ready? I have like the biggest digital learning crush on you.
I don't know what that means, but I hope it's good.
It's very good. I have to tell you that. It's very, very good, but I had to tell you that. Okay. So I couldn't have think of a better person to start off this chat with. So a little bit for everyone who is new to the space. These are talks. We have a couple of them a month, and we really focus on industry professionals and how they got to where they are, because many times we see job titles and we have no clue what their day actually looks like or what the job entails and how they got there. And these really short talks is to help us really kind of have a roadmap on how to get there, how to do it. Some of us in here are students looking for our first job. Some of us are side hustling, doing jobs. Some of us are transitioning into new roles. I don't think there's a single person today who's not in digital learning space. So Zsolt, the pressure is on you. So my first question to you, Zsolt, and everyone is free to ask questions in the chat as we're going along. And we spend about 30 minutes chatting, Zsolt. This is also live streamed right now on Facebook. So as questions come in, I will keep asking you. So if I were to look at your role right now as digital learning and experience leader at AWS, and I had to look at a GPS of what your day looks like. What does your day look like, right? What does it mean to have that role? Why don't you tell us?
Sure. So thank you for everyone to join, and I hope you get something out of this, something practical. I'm more on the tinkering, building side of things rather than the theoretical. Here's a lot of great book and read it and good luck sort of thing. So a lot of things that I'm going to tell you about is less actually about the physical daily things that I do, but more like what I actually either on the side or in the last 20 years. So how all that skills that I have today in digital learning get together and applied. So what I do, I'm in workforce development. So this is a group that is not really L&D per se. It's not a traditional learning and development group that creates courses, digital courses. It is one of my best, I think, roles in 20 years because we're focusing on solving problems. And one of the tools is courses or learning. But there's a lot of other things that you can do that's a lot more effective, fast, a checklist that you create, anything that connecting the right people at the right time could solve problems. So my daily GPS thing, as you put it, Celian, is understanding my audience. And this is one of the skills that it may sound weird that we all talk about digital learning and digital experience, but it all comes from humans. So humans are the most important part because you can have the best technology in the world, and we do. But the problem is that technology itself is not going to solve your problems. If you don't know what you're looking for, if you don't know how to measure it, if you don't know who your audience are and what are their needs, then your technology is just going to be another things on the pile, and then you move to the next flashy things. So what I do a lot is understanding problems and finding solutions and then do something in between. A lot of things that I can mention today is you can simply look it up. We don't have enough time to dive into details, but in the learning space, in 20 years, the most, I think, practical thing I've ever learned and keep doing is Kathy Moore's action mapping. And I can type it in and tell you what that is. But Kathy Moore is basically approaching things from a practical side. Yes, it's great to have science, learning science. You need to understand those. But in a workspace, a lot of things are gray. It is not people sitting in a room and doing experiments. People have a lot of priorities to do, deadlines, resources, needs, that sort of thing. And action mapping is basically a process that helps you cut the fluff and get into the action of what people need to do and how to help them in a digital way.
So your GPS of the day is your action mapping.
Action mapping is not only just what I do, but how I think.
Okay.
It is a process of a mental process, starting with literally your business goals, how it's going to be measured, who are your stakeholders. It is the basic 101 of program management, project management, but with learning as well. And then from there, understanding what are those actions and decisions that your audience needs to do, and then why they're not doing it today. And this is the point when usually in learning, we jump to content creation or courses and put it out there in the digital world. And we're hoping that now we're solving problems.
Okay.
What action mapping does is actually dive into why people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing today. And based on, you have simple little branches of what is the best and most effective approach to solve that. So if someone is not motivated, that's a different story than someone doesn't have the skills, for example.
Perfect. Okay. So my next question for you, and I appreciate that. That's a great nugget because I'm seeing we have a lot of learning and development people in the space. If I were to ask you, I looked at your job role as a house with architecture, and the hard skills are the walls, and the soft skills is the space in between. How much time are you spending in your hard skills and soft skills in your job role?
So I'm probably one of the few unique people that was in the generation where we started computers when I was in like high school or so. So in the perfect age to learn everything about coding and exciting new flashy things. And I went to college, and my first degree is technology. So I know programming, I know the hardware part of it a lot. And then I decided that I love humans, and I took another degree in teaching English and instructional design. So I have both backgrounds. So my house is actually very stable, so to say. Like there's the foundation and everything in it. And I can switch between the two. And this is, I think, one of the best things that you can do is having the foundations of a technology. So you can speak to engineers, you can speak to people who own the technology and ask the right questions. But at the same time, you can translate that into learning stakeholders. Sometimes there's a huge misunderstanding between leadership and technology and IT people. And if you're in between that space in learning, then you can be that bridge. And this is what I do probably 50-50 time in my role. So
is bridging a hard skill or a soft skill?
Bridging is, the bridging is a soft skill. And then you switch between the two. I think for the hard skill, it is something that you need to do daily. Like the pace of change today is so fast that the skills that you learn today on using any software, any skill, tomorrow might be obsolete. Because if you just look at like AI is going to replace a lot of things that manually you do today. And you don't need to code anymore. You just have to explain AI what you want, and then suddenly there's the answer. But without knowing what the answer is supposed to be or the underlying structure, then you can just take the answer and run with it. So you still have to understand the conversation, but it's a different skill set moving towards the soft skills of asking the right questions, which is probably the biggest thing that you can explore.
Okay. So why AWS? This is a fairly new gig for you, right?
I started last summer. I spent 20 years in the corporate world. Half of it was internally at companies, so internal L&D department. Half of it was as a consultant, so a learning consultant technology. So I did both sides. I was a manager, a director for a while, so I did both hiring and on the other side of being hired. And after a while, I think what I realized is my best skill utilization is literally this house that you mentioned that use both of them. I love technology. I love new technology, and cloud is amazing what people can do with cloud, but they need people there who can understand the vision and explain to people of what the solution is, the value, rather than the technology itself. And this is why I like this job.
Very cool. And what do you think landed you the job? Did you have competition?
Of course, every time I apply to a job, every time you apply to a job, there is competition. It is, and this kind of comes back to this question of the what's the difference between a coin and a human? Because every time you apply to a job, you go through the same sort of process. There's the risk of not getting the job you really want, and then getting the job. There's basically a flip of a coin from the manager's side. The difference is when you start flipping coins, there is no history. Every time you flip a coin is 50-50.
Yeah.
So the manager's side, every single interview with you is I either hire you or not. That's it. They don't know about your past. They don't know that the last time you said something that wasn't good, or you didn't go well in the last interview. Meanwhile, you keep actually bringing this back in your mind, like, okay, the last three didn't go well. I really have to do this well. So you bring your memory. You're biased about it. So one thing that helped me throughout this process is treating every interview like a toss of a coin. Yes, I made mistakes previously, but they don't know about it. Yes, I've been done great things previously, but they don't know about it. All they know is what happens in that interview and exchange. So I really want to make sure that I present myself as is, what I really want to do and like. And if it's a match, it's great. So my job is not landing on the job. That's just the beginning of something. And from the hiring manager perspective, this is what I think helps, that from them, hiring someone is not the end. It's actually the beginning. And they want to make sure is that you are capable of adapting to change, learnings, your attitude works well, rather than just the skills itself that you have.
Very cool. I like that. I really, really like that. That was very, very insightful. So in this journey of this job of getting to where you are, did you have any interesting side hustles or do any kind of jobs that were completely outside of this scope, but today you find has lent such context and given you any kind of texture outside of this domain, or you've pretty much predominantly been in this domain?
So since I have both the technical side and the instructional design teaching side, I've been swinging back and forth. So I, for example, worked for the Peace Corps, teaching Hungarian language and culture for a while. Mm-hmm. And there was really just there's no house there. It was all soft skills and learning the culture and that sort of thing. But I brought the house there, the technology. Yeah. Other times I worked for Comcast for 9 years, which is the biggest cable company in the US. There's a lot of energy and technology on that I had to learn new things and less about the other side. On this side, actually, my probably best thing I can mention is just speaking at conferences. And that was a step out of my comfort zone when I started. I had no idea if that works or even people want to listen to me at all. So I just put the proposal in, I got accepted, and then I just started just writing things and spread it out and then see if anybody can find it useful.
Okay. Do you hire a lot of people, Zsolt?
So not in my role today. My previous role when I was a director, it was a lot of contract and full-time, and so I did interviewing weekly, and it was a tense 2.5 years finding the right people for the right thing.
And can you identify like that super skill that you would see or you can feel or you can touch that you kind of knew that even if someone did not have, let's say, all the hard skills that you needed, if you identify this, you were like, that might be something that I will look at, or did that didn't apply to you?
So I think for hiring, people who are on the other side submit their resumes and waiting for this job interview and then want to succeed. It is a very different world from the receiving side. So if you're an instructional designer, you feel confident about yourself, you have a great resume, you submit your resume. As a manager, you get hundreds of them. and they all look the same, because if you're an instructional designer, you probably do the same thing. You talk to the SMEs and stakeholders and create storyboards and build courses. Everybody does the same thing. They follow the same standards. They use the same tools. So the question is, how do you know who's better for a certain job? It's not the person itself or the skill set, but it's the match between the role that I'm looking for and the skill set. And a lot of times it comes down to portfolios. That is one of the most important things to have, because in a portfolio that you build, just to show that what you can do is you can be yourself. And if that's a match, if I need a creative person and there's creative in your portfolio, then I'll go probably with that person, because I've seen some sort of accomplishment already and you're excited about it. If it's more about a leadership position when they need to get out there and bring people to get in a room and facilitate, I want to see some sort of a facilitation skill that you already have to start with, and you enthusiastic about it, not just want to have a job and in the middle of the project you drop. Biggest fear of a hiring manager.
And what is in your portfolio? If I were to say to you, what are those 2 or 3 things that you show in your portfolio as to who Zsolt is? If I were hiring Zsolt, what would that be?
So I have a lot in my previous life, so-called, for 10, 15 years. I was really in the weeds of tinkering and creating prototypes. So I pushed storyline to the limits and all the tools that you have out there, adding a little bit of a JavaScript to it and making things happen that doesn't come with out of the box. Those are a lot, and putting into actually one site and put it out there for people to just pick and choose whatever they need. So that's one side of my portfolio. The other one is more the strategic approach of how today we use skills for helping the workforce to get from A to B. What are the tools that you can use? What are the methodologies that you can use? So that is more like a strategic approach today. There's a lot of tangible things, practical, if you do development. I can share the site later on. You can pick a lot of things out of there and just use it as is. I'm doing more of that strategy now rather than the hands-on little physical building anymore.
Okay. So I'm going to take some of the questions before I get back to my questions. Do you use design thinking to solve problems? That's one of the questions.
Yeah, so Kathy Moore and design thinking actually works very well together, because design thinking starts with moving from content to a problem-solving, human-centered approach. You're not starting out with what course am I building and what content needs to be in, but what is the actual problem from the empathy perspective, and then being ideate from there. So they work well together. And there's an awesome book on design thinking from Sharon Bowler and another author. They actually took design thinking and turned it into more of a learning and development approach. So they have filled with practical examples of how to use this very theoretical thing in learning that works within actual learning environments.
Very cool. Very cool. I have a question for you. So your current team, if someone in this group were putting together their own engagement and design team, who are some critical hires that you think they need to make on that team?
And this is where asking the right questions come in. I would spend you like at least 20 minutes on asking, what are your goals?
Sure.
What are you trying to achieve? Sure. How do you measure that?
Sure.
And once I know that, then I can put together the team to accomplish that goal. So without knowing what you're trying to do,
sure,
how it's measured, then it's hard to tell what sort of rule you need.
So let's give an example of a company that has a lot of content. We have 1,000,001 companies that have tremendous content, or it might be bloggers, or it might be a training company, and they're doing a lot of offline training, and they now want to be able to go online. So the basic in terms of who do you need on your team to really kind of get online? Let's start with that basic level. Who would be some of the hires you want to do in that role?
So moving from a face-to-face environment to online, it's not as simple as I need 5 people to take the content and put it in
Sure.
content and push it. That was the approach in 2000, back in the
Yeah.
days, when suddenly we can put things online. And I remember there was a company came to me and said, I have 70 pages of a document. How long is it going to take to put it online?
Yeah.
I said, it takes 5 minutes, but why would you want to do that?
Mhm.
So the same concept today, that what you need, you need a good skill set of one who understands and good with instructional design, understanding needs analysis.
Mhm.
So you're not just taking the content, but understanding why it was designed the way it was designed,
Mhm.
how and what outcomes that you need, how you measure that today, what works. So
Mhm.
basically, as someone who can say, I think we need to keep XYZ and try to replicate that in some way in digital world. We need to drop this part because it was a face-to-face and it's not very effective. We
Sure.
need to add a lot more because we're going to not have someone watching you doing all these things. There's no feedback in the digital world if it's face-to-face from moving to digital. So I need someone who is a good analysis turning the two worlds. You need someone who understands the technology, because the worst thing you can do is having great minds design something and then put it on a platform that doesn't work. Online in 2020 was basically a disaster because people moved as fast as they can, used the platform they had, and called it online learning. So you need to understand the pros and cons of the technology. You may not be able to choose the right thing because you don't have the resources, but at least you understand how to push to the limits and what you can use with that technology, what cannot. I don't think one technology works magic today. It's going to be a combination of things.
Mhm.
So you need someone who knows the technology part, and then you also need someone who knows your audience well, because what you want to do online is one big advantage of being online and digital is that you can personalize your learning. Now you can really know who the audience is, what their skill level is, and what they need really to get from A to B, rather than everybody takes the same course like in a face-to-face. In face-to-face, it's really hard to have different skill set moving around in different pace. Online, that's the point. You can finally do that, customize. You can still have a baseline for everyone, but then you can do faster if you already have the skill set, slower if you need to go slower. That's the point of getting online. So all these people probably you need in a team.
Good, I'm glad. So it gets into our next question from someone. What's the difference between an instructional designer role and a learning experience designer role? Or is there one? Or is it just the title, these things?
So there is a HR appropriate answer to this, and there is reality. So the official difference is what you see in descriptions is people move from instructional design to experience design, learning experience design, when there is more of a UX sort of approach. You need to understand how to prototype things. You need to visually represent and more about the actual end-to-end experience rather than the instructions per se. But that's kind of basically saying from bad instructional design, go to good learning experience design. But there's in between a lot of things. It's most of the time, I actually did an article on this and I did a search. If you take the title away and you just look and read what the actual tasks are in the job descriptions, it's really hard to figure out which one's which.
Yeah, that's why I was asking.
So it is most of the hiring manager loves to use learning experience designers because it's a newer, fresher. And basically what they're saying is we've been doing Storyline and Rise and Captivate or whatever modules that was either a talking person or a lot of reading. And I want something else.
Okay. This is a really great question from one of the consultants in our group. We learned that in most cases, our clients did not know the real problem. So how much time is invested first to discover the real problem before starting to solve it?
Yes, and this is exactly why you need Kathy Moore's action mapping. So the whole concept of action map, that at the end, the very end of this process, you have a map. And the map is basically, here's the action that people need to do, the behavior, and it mapped to content that they need to know and activities they need to practice. Instead of starting from the other way and I say, we need to solve this problem and here's a lot of things they need to know. And at the end, you realize that they're not solving the problem. So in Kathy Moore's and in actually every single, even Addie starts with analysis. But the point is that you have to ask the right questions up front. And sometimes when I do consulting, it's somewhat surprising to stakeholders when they're ready to go and build, and it's like the 24-hour thing that we need to get this done by yesterday. I sit down, it's like, let's step back and say, why are you doing it now? What is it that you're trying to solve? And it's like, of course we have to do it because blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, how do you know that it's a problem? And then it's a silence because, well, we know. Okay, but do you have some kind of data around this? Like, what are we moving to? Give me something that you're measuring today that's important for you. And then the second part of this answer is sometimes they ask what they think the solution is, because that's all they think they know. So a stakeholder can come to you and say, I need a 15-minute e-learning on XYZ. Now you can jump in and start building it, and turns out midway that it's not the problem. Or you can ask them, yes, that's really important. This is one way to solve it. Let me dig into more details so literally can make it more impactful. And then start asking about those questions of, okay, what are we solving for? And what you do with this conversation is separate their intentions and their execution. So they might have good intentions of solving a problem, but they think that there's only one way to solve it, and this is what they ask you to do. You first, if you say no, that's not the way to do it, then you might sound like you're a negative person, or you say no. So you do have to accept, like, yeah, we can do it, but let's have a conversation and make sure that this is the most impactful way of solving your problem.
Very cool. Another question, how do you develop your questioning skills?
By asking them. And literally, you can read books all the time. You can watch YouTube videos and all that. This is something like a bicycle. You get on it and start moving, because you're going to fall a lot, but that's the only way to learn it. It gets easier after time because your brain automatically kind of branches and asks the right questions. But when you start, like, for example, if you take Kathy Moore's action mapping, she has templates that you start with. Here are the 5 things that you have to ask. And if you get XYZ answer, you might go different ways. So you can start with a template at least, but you need to start asking those questions.
Cool. In an interview, what are the 3 key questions you ask early on? Like, kind of like as your filter. Every interview starts with the same thing of tell me something about yourself, or, just a chit chat thing. That is your calling card to tell you what you're really passionate about. Help the hiring manager to give something that you latch on and talk through, not just something that you think it's good, but actually relevant and could be then transition into something, skills that you want to use on the job. Because the point, again, with the questions is not whether you can able to do the job now as is, but can you be a good team member and productive in 6 months or a year? Other questions are simply tell me about a time when you failed and how you recovered, what was the result, that sort of thing. Because it tells me how they deal with failure. Nobody in the world is going to have every project lovely from start to end. And I want to know what happens when it hits the fan and suddenly they need to do something. They just go nuts. They disappear. They ask the right questions. They escalate. That sort of thing I need to know. Okay. What about this is a good one. Some behavioral tricks you have learned along the way to keep people engaged in learning?
There's one single effective trick. Give them what they need. So if something is irrelevant because somebody decided that this is a great thing and everybody in the company needs to know, and it's really not relevant to the people, then you can put all the tricks in the world in it. You can gamify it and have like all kinds of VR and immersive thing. If they don't care about it because it's not relevant or not relevant now, then you can spend all kinds of money on it and resources not going to work. So first of all, make sure that it is meant for them, it's valuable for them. But two is that show them the value. So rather than focus on the learning, the instruction part, even if you love instructions, nobody cares about students will be able to do X, Y, Z on page 1. Tell me, if I get through this, how does that affect my job? What can I do better, faster, easier? Or how does that affect my life? That's what they need to start with, not with, you'll be able to sort the 7 pillars of the sales process. Like, do I have to sort the sales process ever in my job? No.
I like that. And is there a way that you can, it's kind of like understanding the why, right? If we go to, why you're doing this, and in a very tangible way, showing the outcome. Is there an, in terms of your online and in terms an effective way to show that? So there's a difference in showing that for someone who might be in sales to someone who might be in different roles. Have you found, in terms of your your body of work, of this is the best way to illustrate that for someone? Because it's not a certificate, and it's not just saying to them, you will be able to, better do these 4 or 5 things, through a checklist. So is there any advice you can give in that space?
Sure. So first of all, you need to understand your audience and what motivates them. To how are they incentivized? For salespeople, they live on quota of how much they sell, and they measure it daily. That's a very different approach than, let's say, service people on the phone who do technical support. They measured by first call resolution of how many times the customer needs to call back. What was their customer satisfaction? So it always starts with who's your audience and what is the actual measurement that they measured on. And then from there, connect. So I can say, do you want to double your quota this month by doing X, Y, Z? Now that grabs their attention. If I say, you actually can get to the root problem with using this tool twice as fast as you do today, would you try that? Yeah, of course, because that means I can spend less time with the customer. They're going to be happy. I can have more customers served, which is my measurement. So it always starts with what is the measurement and how can you move that needle. If you cannot move the needle of how you're measured, then you're basically wasting your time.
So for example, if a company is working on themes and values across the company, that has to get translated to each division and each department for it to have meaning for them. Otherwise it doesn't really have meaning.
Yeah, so a lot of things in training is not really training, but more like change management and communication. And if you treat it as training, then what happens is probably the best coming up with the worst way of putting into a container. So if you think something is really important to access and know and be aware of, then a one-time training, let's say 15 minutes, is nothing compared to, like, let's say 6 months. Like, people forget it in a week.
Yeah.
You have to have some sort of a place that they can access that thing on the time when they need it. So the training should be not about memorizing the values and that sort of thing, but how to use those on the job. So if there is a tool, then it's a checklist, then teach the checklist itself, not what's in the checklist. Sure. If it's about thinking, which is more about the values, then build in reflection time rather than just telling them what it is and then go. Really ask them about it, what they think, how do they translate these values into their role. And then the last thing I want to say about digital learning is that it doesn't always translate into a one to a black box sort of thing, that I take a course in the LMS, me personally, Zsolt, and nobody else. Like, in the real world, I work with others, I work with the team members, I work with across the team, people should actually experience this together, reflect on them, rather than one person goes into LMS, takes a course for 15 minutes, and suddenly becomes the value maker of the company without understanding or reflecting or talking with anybody else. That's really not happening.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I have a couple of last questions for you. How would you cater to different skill sets and learning styles with online learning?
Okay, so there's two different questions. There's a skill set and a learning style. The learning style is an easy one to answer. Basically, learning styles, the fact that you would design things in the same way as they're supposed to have learning styles, and it would actually end up with a better learning outcome. It's basically a myth. You can Google it. You can actually make $5,000. I can send you the link if you prove it. It doesn't work. It's a myth that everybody think that they should cater for. And what happens to that is they waste energy and time and resources on trying to do these learning style things instead of focusing on what the content is and what their outcome is. And that determines what's the best way to approach that. So that's about learning styles. The skill set, different skill set, is a different story. You need to understand the skill set in order to serve like the gap between the current skill set and the desired skill set. So when you just create a training that has content in it, it's for everyone, it's going to serve no one. Because what happens is that I might have like a 5 minutes somewhere in the middle that applies to me in my skill set, at my level, and then the rest was just waste of time. So you need to have some sort of a diagnostic tool first, understand that of what you do today, and should be a 360 ideally. So there is knowledge check online, and you can have scenario-based things, that sort of thing, but also your job, your everyday accomplishments, your KPIs. The two together can tell you where you are, and working with your manager, understanding what the gap is.
Okay, I like that. So you really have to look out at the end of the day at the human. And I think a lot of people forgets that, right? They have just the human looking in and nothing looks out at the human. Okay, wonderful. One last question for you. And I guess we're going to ask you this about you, Zsolt. You tell us about, this is one of those interview questions, but I guess we're going to ask you as you being interviewed. Tell us about your weakness. Tell us about a weakness that you have and how you have turned it into a strength.
Yeah, so, I have many. We would need another call to get through all my weaknesses. But one is actually, it's very relevant to the kind of like a transition that I'm doing now, the more strategic role versus the hands-on building things. Sure. I love tinkering. I love building prototypes. I love showing this to people like, hey, here's something that you can take if you want, here's the code. That takes a lot of time. So writing a paper is easy. You come up with something, put it on, publish it, done. Actually make it happen in a prototype takes time. And so sometimes I fall into this, oh, this is so exciting. I'm going to build this game. And I start building this game thing or interaction. Can it be done? And then run into challenges, coding-wise. And I have to find the solution. And I spend way more time on building this prototype than I was supposed to, because it's exciting. But at the same time, the strategy is just waiting. So what I do is I need to mitigate it. So I do have these reality checks with, I have to find the right people who can tell me like, hey, get off of this thing. Like it's really cool, but stop here. This is the time you spend on it. Let's move on. So my suggestion is, if you're into that sort of thing, like you're tinkering, figuring out works or not, find someone in your circle who you trust, someone you can really says like, okay, you're way down to the trenches right now. Let's stop that for a second and go back to what you're really supposed to be doing. And you need those people around you.
Yeah, that's the self-aware of all your, you know, as you say, knowing what people's levels are. It's being self-aware of your strengths and your gaps, and making sure you surround yourself with gap keepers.
And most of the time, friends and family don't work. Don't try. That becomes an issue if you bring your family in it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, Zsolt, I cannot tell you how helpful this was. And for many of the, we have many people who are transitioning from offline training space to online training space. What would be, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to them in terms of that transition of being offline, that there is real human connection and they're brilliant at it, and all of a sudden they find themselves in this similar new space? What would be the one thing you would want them to know in terms of that?
That you can bring your expertise online, and you don't start from scratch. It's not a different world. It's a different set of tools.
Mm-hmm.
And so all you need to do is, one is you have to be open-minded to unlearn and relearn things. So because you're an expert, you do a lot of things face-to-face automatically.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the faces. Somebody doesn't understand something right away. Let me explain it to you. That all works now automatically. When you move online, you lose all of that. So first of all, you have to step back, and the more you can actually see people taking online learning from their end, the better, because you can see their struggles. And then you can work with someone who knows the technology, because it's going to take time to learn the technology inside out. But you can bring the expertise of how people work, how their brain work, and how you can take the content and accept what was face-to-face into a digital learning that still excites them, that the conversation should happen somewhere. It's not, again, a one-to-one anymore. You can become a facilitator online, which is a slightly more different role than the stand-up face-to-face. In face-to-face, you control the room, and a lot of times you're the expert. In a facilitation online, you need to have the tools going on. You need to actually connect people, but it's more like triggering those conversations. So it's a slightly different skill set, but you can bring it in. You know what people makes tick. You knew people how to react. What makes when and how a joke helps. Those are skills that you need to somehow translate online, because otherwise we just have these boring things that people talk through for an hour, and in the chat you ask 5 questions in the end, and that was your online learning.
All right. So I saw AWS has moved into they created AWS academies in India. So is AWS going to be kind of the university of the future?
I don't know. I know that for the cloud services, Amazon and AWS offered, I think, millions of hours of whatever the fee was, free to learn cloud computing and understanding a cloud. So that's going to be, I think, part of it. There are other places when you can learn about the cloud. It is not about digital learning per se. It is about the focusing on learning in the cloud and using the cloud services. For us, we still need people who understand the learning, the value, how the brain works, the science behind it, and how you can use the online tools and cloud services to support that. So it is not taking over the world in an education sort of thing.
Okay. I just thought I should ask. So thank you so much, Zsolt. I'm going to end with this one question. If you were to name one human skill that made the absolute difference for you throughout your career, that's kind of like a little bit of your hidden superpower, what would that human skill, if you had to describe it, what would that be?
So it would be listening, which is a skill that generally people don't brag about, because it sounds like you don't know what you're doing because you're sitting silently somewhere. But active listening is the base for everything that we talked about today. Kathy Moore's action mapping, listening to what your stakeholder is saying. It is listening with a purpose. It's not just listening music. It's really figuring out what are those words, those little gates that I can open to get into their mind. And that is, I think, a skill that you're going to need no matter what position you have, because you're going to work with people and you have to listen to them.
Okay, good. Well, thank you wholeheartedly, Zsolt, for joining us today. This will be available to our entire community. Everyone, there is a, Malika will post a link for all of you where we put some active listening micro practices for everyone to take away with them. So you can actually practice what it is Zsolt just talked about. Thank you wholeheartedly, Zsolt. As I said to you, I completely have, and I will continue to have this digital crush on you. I have to get my book, your book, but I really enjoy and have been enjoying your work.
Thank you so much, and thanks for everyone. I hope you at least have 3 things you took away today that you apply tomorrow. And if not, you know where I live on LinkedIn. You can start complaining. So have a great evening, morning, wherever you are. And again, I'm happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, shoot me a message there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.